Welcome to The Explainer. So, a few words from Donald Trump about NATO.
A lot of people just dismissed them. But what if they weren't just a threat? What if they were something much more final?
According to the source for today's Explainer, they were actually a verdict, one that basically signaled the end of the entire global order as we've known it. Okay, so it all kicks off with this line from Donald Trump talking about NATO. He said they were being put to the test and that he would, quote, never forget. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a complaint, right? Maybe a warning. But the source material we're digging into today from the Promethean Updates channel makes this really bold claim. This wasn't a complaint, not at all. It was a final judgment. A verdict had been reached. A verdict on what, exactly? I mean, that's the big question, isn't it? And according to this analysis, the answer starts to unravel this deliberate, systematic plan to completely dismantle the global financial order. So first, let's break down why the source sees this as a verdict. It all centers around a very specific test case, Iran, and the security of the Strait of Hormuz. So according to this viewpoint, the big test for NATO was Iran. When the U.S. asked its allies for help securing the world's most critical choke point for energy, their response was, well, they'd help, but only after any fighting was already over. So from Trump's perspective, the conclusion was pretty simple. They weren't there for us, so we no longer have to be there for them. And that leads to the source's really dramatic conclusion. This whole statement wasn't some threat about what might happen in the future. It was a public announcement that the old transatlantic alliance was, for all intents and purposes, over. A funeral oration for a dead order. But okay, this is where the whole analysis takes a really sharp turn. The source argues that the entire conflict with Iran, all the drama with NATO, it was all a misdirection. The real war, it claims, is being fought on a totally different battlefield. The argument here is that what looks to us like geopolitical chaos is actually just cover for a much, much bigger story, a systematic takedown of the old London-based imperial financial system. And the source uses this incredibly vivid phrase for it: systematic, deliberate decapitation. The idea is that this isn't some accident. It's a planned demolition of the financial structures that have been running the world for decades, even centuries. So what's the evidence for this supposed financial war? Well, the source points to a fundamental shift in who controls risk and, by extension, power in global trade. We're talking about maritime insurance. You see, for 300 years, Lloyd's of London has basically controlled global shipping because they controlled the insurance. The source claims that, very quietly, a new player, the U.S. Development Finance Corporation, working hand in glove with the military, has just replaced it. They've become the new insurer for those crucial shipping lanes in the Gulf. And check out this quote, which the source attributes to Scott Bessent. It frames this move not just as a simple replacement, but as a massive upgrade, a whole new level of security, directly backed by the power of the United States. Now, the second piece of evidence the source brings up is, well, it's maybe the most audacious part of this whole thing. And it comes from a single, seemingly throwaway remark. There it is. At a forum, Trump says Iran has to open up the Strait of Trump, Hormuz. A slip of the tongue, right? A joke? The source says absolutely not. It poses this question: was this just a joke, or was it a public declaration of American sovereign control over the most critical energy choke point on the entire planet? And let's not forget what's at stake here. We're talking about 20% of the entire world's seaborne oil passing through this one narrow strait. If you control that, you have incredible leverage over the whole global economy. And this is where the source makes a key distinction. This isn't the old petrodollar system, which was all based on financial agreements and currencies. This analysis suggests we're looking at something totally new, a system based on direct, physical control of trade, all guaranteed by the U.S. military. Okay, so if the old order is dead and this new system of physical control is taking its place, what does this new world actually look like according to this analysis? Well, for starters, this viewpoint completely throws out the popular idea of a U.S.-China economic Cold War. It actually calls that narrative an imperial trap, designed to keep the world's two biggest physical economies fighting each other, while the old system pulls the strings. Instead, it points to this really surprising common ground: the historical figure Sun Yat-sen. Now, he's a hero to both Beijing and Taipei, but crucially, the source calls him an American system economist. Why? Because he rejected the British free trade model and instead favored state-backed industrial development, a tradition shared by American figures like Alexander Hamilton and Abraham Lincoln. This quote from the source really sums up its entire historical argument. The claim is that the old empire actively worked for over a century to keep the US and China from realizing they actually shared a common economic worldview, one based on sovereign nations and real physical production. So to quickly recap the narrative here, it starts with a verdict on NATO. That reveals a hidden financial war. We see the mechanisms of that takeover, replacing Lloyd's, renaming the Strait, and it all points toward a new global order based on direct trade between powerful sovereign nations. Now, it's really important to remember, what we've just gone through is an explainer of one very specific and very provocative interpretation of world events drawn directly from the source material we're looking at today. And all of that leaves us with the source's big concluding question. When we look at all the chaos in the world today, are we just seeing the messy, dying throes of an old empire? Or are we actually witnessing the birth pains of something entirely new?